Well, it's 4:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And we like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. And a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And can we have an adoption of the agenda? Duncan McMaster, Councillor McMaster, and seconded by Councillor Challenger. All in favor? Or sorry, all in favor, none opposed, any opposed? Carried. I'm just going to change my screen here so that I can see you all. There we go. And adoption of the minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
By Councillor Chalmers, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any omissions, deletions, corrections? All in favor? Any opposed? Minutes are adopted. Motion's carried. We have public comment on agenda items.
Through the mayor, no one has signed up for public comment.
All right. Brings me to my mayor's report. And I've been the mayor for 30 minutes. But I would like to take this time to thank the community for the honor and privilege of being here to serve as mayor. And over the past couple months, I've had the opportunity to speak to many community members. And perhaps more importantly, I've had the opportunity to listen to the many hopes and desires and concerns our community has. And I want to assure all that I'll bring those forward to my role as mayor. We do have many challenges ahead, from infrastructure, community health, to improving social amenities. And though those challenges can be great, they also offer the opportunity for great success. And I look forward to working with this council, with district staff, with our community, to meet all those challenges. Together, we can overcome, we can work together as a community, we can grow together as a community. And so I look forward to the next 18 months working together. I think it's going to be a great time. I think we're going to do some good things together. So once again, thank you. Moving on to delegations. We have a delegation from Tom Balfour, Fish Program Manager, Central Westcoast for Society.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Tom, you can share your screen at any time.
Hello, everyone. Okay, is that working for everyone? Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for having me at your first council here, new mayor and council. And yeah, we'll try and keep this real quick. My name is Tom Balfour. I'm a biologist and the fish program manager for the Central Westcoast Forest Society. And normally I come in every year or two to sort of just give you guys an update of where we're at and what we're doing. And normally it's a bit of a salmon conservation restoration 101. But today I was asked to talk a bit more about the structure and Central West Coast as a business and as a community group. It's funny, not too long ago, I remember sitting in on council meeting where they were deciding a grant that we had applied for, and one of the councilors said, "Oh, well, that company is a Ucluelet company. We should not be supporting them," which is pretty frustrating, and especially because our organization is by design very much here to serve all of the West Coast, and so that's kind of the stuff I want to touch on today, and talk a little bit about salmon stuff. So the society formed in '94, '95. A lot of big changes happening on the coast around then. That was sort of the collapse of BC salmon fishing. We had the war in the woods and the end of large-scale sound. So yeah, big changes in the community. Obviously, some positive changes with the protections, some of the old growth that was remaining, and a lot of good changes to our forestry practices coming out of the Clayoquot Science Panel. But at the same time, we had a lot of people here that had just lost their livelihoods, whether it be logging or fishing, and kind of thinking, what's next? Just the Central West Coast was sort of founded to address some of these issues. Like, look, we've got all these destroyed watersheds and all these unemployed loggers and fishermen, and an NDP government with a bunch of money for habitat work. Let's see if we can make something of this. And when it was founded, very much our structure is appointed seats for the District of Tofino, Ucluelet, PAC Rim, and ACRD, and then seats for industry reps and other forestry, fishing, and aquaculture. And we still have this structure today, but the idea being, let's have all the community stakeholders at and the 5 nations, of course, all have an elected seat. And so the idea was to bring all this shareholders to the table and leave the politics at the door and see what we can do to help recover our fish populations and promote a healthy community. So we've been at this for over 26 years now. I really like some of these old pictures. Maybe you guys have been around long enough to recognize some of these faces. But we've been working out here a long time under that sort of mandate. And in that 26 years, we've raised and invested over $25 million into salmon-focused restoration, research, and education efforts. So yeah, kind of quickly, I went over this already, but this is our board structure, volunteer board of directors, just like any NGO. We have our appointed seats, and then we have our at-large seats for industry rep and technical experts. Actually, the DOT stopped sending a representative a few years ago, and that's just something what I follow up with on staff. It'd be nice to have representation again on our board. But yeah, so the foundation and the mandate for the society is to promote healthy communities and healthy ecosystems through restoration, education, stewardship, and research and monitoring. And the Central West Coast really preaches this holistic approach, both to restoration, which means just in terms of thinking of the trees and the bears and the bugs, in terms of salmon conservation, the whole picture, but it goes bigger than that. And it's about having healthy communities, and people with jobs have more time to care about the environment. If people get to go see these wild places and then interact with these wild fish, that can go so much further in conservation than some of our direct restoration work. So we do really preach this sort of holistic, whole picture approach to salmon conservation and supporting our communities. So that's where we came from, and this is where we're at in 2021, busier than ever. To date, for this year, we have secured over $2 million in funding from grants, contracts, and donations. And so that's how we make our money. A majority of our funding is from grants, usually federal and private. And then recently, we have been doing a lot of fee-for-service contracting, operating just like any other environmental consultant or biology consultant, picking up contracts. We can offer discounted rates, and as well as any proceeds we make from that, that gets reinvested into the society and into the community. And just like any good NGO, the goal is to get off of grant dependency. And so we try and diversify as much as we can, from selling t-shirts to doing contracting to whatever it takes to sort of keep the lights on. And then of course get rounded out by public and private donations there. So I'd love to get into all these projects, but I can't because of the time. So we have a whole range of restoration projects, kind of ranging from wood placement to slope stability to repairing and thinning and planting, as far north as Tseshaht Harbor, to the Tla-o-qui-aht River and in northern Barkley Sound. And we even are doing a culvert replacement in Port Alberni this year as part of our move to expand and support. And of course, research projects. We have some work looking at Kennedy Lake sockeye habitat. We're doing some hatchery reform work with Thornton Creek Hatchery. And then of course we have our community projects. It's a whole range from the Kennedy Backroads cleanup, which we got another one planned this weekend, to the Westcoast Triple Plank, which is a surf, skate, snowboard contest fundraiser. It's a lot of fun out here. Then to all sorts of site tours and classroom visits. We work with the Res and Thornton Creek, Heartwood Kids, CBT, a couple of university partners. Yeah, just trying to spread the word. And then our contracts. We have quite a few big contracts this year, including the environmental monitoring for the Kennedy Hill, subcontracting for the Parks Trail. We've got the hydro project up at Hot Springs Cove, as well as doing a couple of risk assessments for DFO as part of their West Coast rebuilding plan. So we're busy, lots on the go for this year. This is one of our restoration sites in Tranquil here. So add a little bit of flash to the picture, but we're using large wood structures here to kind of stabilize this bar and reduce sediment flow through the system. I'd love to talk more about habitat restoration, but that's not what answer the topic today. We have to move on. So of course, just like when the society was founded, meaningful employment opportunities for the West Coast is a big part of why we exist. And some of our projects, the salmon conservation does come second to employment and training, and it is all a balancing act. So CWFS is a living wage employer. We currently have 18 full-time staff and then an extended family of field crew. And the typical model is, depending whose territory we work in, that's where we hire sort of bigger crews for the field projects and then maintain our kind of core staff year round the best we can. But then of course we know like community employment, indigenous employment is a lot more than just posting a job and then hoping you get the right people. We do have to make sure our community members are trained and equipped and working in positions they like. So we do a lot of work on capacity building in the community, and that's providing training and education opportunities. And this year, through the Healthy Watersheds Initiative, we've secured over $1 million to be put towards capacity building, education, and training focused around watershed restoration this year. So we partnered with the nations to kind of ask what training is of value and who needs it, to put together this sort of group. And we're doing a wide range of courses, from a 5-week environmental technician course to some heavy equipment operator to some language classes, right up to funding 2 different master's students, one at UNBC and one at SFU, really trying to practice what we preach in the capacity building and address the needs of our community rather than tell these people what classes they should take. So that's been a really fun initiative this year, and always sort of a big part of our work. And then our services. I think we got some time here, but so that's another thing I wanted to touch base with the district about, because we do offer a wide range of services that we are hired, or you can hire us to do. And most things that any kind of normal environmental consultant could do, from environmental management planning to environmental monitoring to assessments, kind of you name it, we can do it. And then of course, like I said, any proceeds from that kind of fee for service contracting does go back to the community and back to our projects. And I do know that the district is moving towards social procurement or social value in the procurement process, and you know, that's something Central West Coast I think can really help. That's sort of what we do, and that is kind of the role we fill on a lot of these big highway projects. For example, when the ministry comes to town and like we would like X amount of Indigenous employment, and Tla-o-qui-aht says yes, we would like that as well, but neither sort of has the capacity to make that happen. So we actually are in the process of signing memorandums of understanding with each of the nations, but right now we sort of act as this kind of informal environmental wing that they trust. If Central West Coast receives the contract, we will facilitate getting their people trained, ready, and working on these projects, and making sure the ministry or whatever government agency or whoever we're working for fulfills their end, and making sure the nations and the employees are happy and satisfied in their jobs, and more and more that is the role we're filling, which is we're really proud to take on. That's sort of us. And we have had in the past projects with the district. I don't think we have anything lined up this year, but we're definitely open. We got some ideas. There's plenty of creek restoration, and there's plenty of big projects coming that need monitors and stuff like that. So we'll talk with staff about ways we can work together. I just want to, we do not do it alone. This is very much, we're a broad partnership, loving foundation. The whole point of this organization right from the start has been like, here's an issue, no politics, let's solve it, who's kind of interested. And I think that really resonates with a lot of people. We don't have a lot of controversy. We don't fill the activism role, and there's time and place for that, but that's just not us. So yeah, can't really get into all of these, but there's a huge amount of support that goes into every project every year. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at. And we do have the Kennedy Backroads cleanup this weekend. Go deal with some of that trash out there. It's always a fun time. Like we've been drawing over 100 people each time.
Tom, I hate to interrupt,
Oh.
but you have reached 10 minutes, and so I'll just ask you to conclude.
That's all I got. This was a filler. Nothing else.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah,
It's very informative. Great. I love the video. I watched the video on your little promo video. It was great.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're really happy. That one just came out in January, I think.
Any questions from council for Tom?
Yeah, I had one.
Go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, Tom, thank you for the presentation. At the beginning, you said that there wasn't representation from the District of Tofino, but there was a seat available. So I'm just wondering, what is the process and why is there no one in that seat?
So yeah, the seat is there and open, and it's always been set aside for the District of Tofino. I'm not heavily involved in the board stuff. I do remember at the time the district decided, well, we can't sit on every NGO board, so we're not going to do that anymore. But there's our board is going to still push for it. It's been a discussion, and it is coming back to that founding process, like those founding days where the district was very much a part of the society, and that's why we maintained that seat. It's open. Everyone wants to sit in it.
Yeah, thank you.
Through the mayor, it's Councillor Steer. Would it be possible to take the screen share off at this point?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now I can see everybody's hands.
And I do have a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the presentation. And I don't know how you guys stay away from politics, but congratulations. I did have a quick question on, I know that you guys were working on the Centennial Park, and I don't know if you're still involved or if that's completed or what the status of that particular project is.
Yeah, as far as my understanding with the Centennial Park project, it's the rain gardens sort of flood management stuff that we were contracted for is complete. But there's like Centennial Creek has all sorts of problems other than that rain garden that we would love to approach with the district. But as far as I understand, that contract is done and that sort of project is done. But we would like to explore further options. Both Centennial and Mackenzie Creek is another one we've talked about with the DOT.
Any other questions for Tom from council? Thank you once again, Tom, for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks for your time, guys. Good luck with the new position.
Thank you. All for delegations. Moving on, correspondence. Does council have any particular correspondence they'd like to address? Go ahead, Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, I would like to see us write letters of support for items 7.4 and 7.8.
So that is 7.4 is correspondence from Jonathan X. Coate, Mayor, City of New Westminster, regarding letters to Ministers of Tourism and Labor in support of laid-off hotel and tourism industry workers.
Yeah, I think as a tourist town, it behooves us to write a letter of support for that.
Any other comments from council?
You're
Yeah,
muted.
Go ahead, Councillor Challenger. Oh, you're muted.
You're
Does-
not muted, but we can't hear you.
Sometimes this, has anybody else had this happen where you have to, oh, there you're on?
Hear me now? Yeah, I think it was connected to my headphones. Okay, great. So is the comment, can I comment on another correspondence, or do we continue with Duncan's
gonna-
first?
We're going to deal with this correspondence first because I believe we're going to ask staff to write a letter.
Okay, great. Thank you. You can move on.
So to go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I thought the same thing on the, on 7.4. So yes, I would support Councillor McMaster's idea to write letters of support.
Okay, let's go ahead here. How shall we proceed?
So if I may, Your Worship, is it council's wish to authorize the mayor to write a letter more or less along the same lines as has come from New Westminster, City of New Westminster? They have a very long resolution that they have prepared. You know, we can bring something back in 2 weeks, or council can simply authorize yourself, Your Worship, to write a letter in support of the same ideas.
Yeah, these I did find these this particular letter rather long. So unless time is of the essence, perhaps we should write a shorter letter and come back. What would you suggest, McMaster? What would you like, Councillor McMaster?
I'm relatively easy. I don't see that, you know, time is of the essence, but I just think we should write a letter of support. So if staff wants to prepare a letter for the mayor to sign, that's fine.
Let's
So
do that.
I'll move that staff prepare a letter for the mayor's signature in support of item 7.4 in the correspondence.
We have a seconder. Any further comments? All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving along here. Any other letters, Council?
I mentioned 7.8.
Oh, 7.8, thank you. Income assistance to a livable rate.
And it's not just for disabled or anything like that. I think everybody should be having a livable wage of some form or another. So I would support this for any class. So I would again move that staff prepare a letter for the mayor's signature in support of item 7.8.
Moment here. Councillor Steer.
Second it.
Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Challenger, did you have your hand up there?
Just for another letter, but I support.
Okay, okay, sure. That's good. Okay, all in favor for this one? Any opposed? None opposed. Excellent, is carried. And okay, Councillor Challenger, go ahead.
Great, thanks. I would recommend writing a letter of support for item 7.5, the letter of support for the 988 crisis line.
I'll second that.
Excellent. Seconded by Councillor Thick. Any other comments? I think this is a good one. I think this is right on board. Hard to argue with the 988 proposal. Go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, I did speak to a couple of people who work at the hospital regarding this idea, and they were also in support. So I felt that you know, also validates our it seems to be a consensus here, but I think it's a really good thing. And I you know, to make it really concise, you know, one of them is short, but I think just an endorsement of others would be sufficient. Thank you.
Okay, CAO McPherson, how is that for an endorsement of 988, or would you like a motion to write a letter?
If it's coming from council, we should have a resolution. And I think we probably we're 3/4 of the way there.
Okay.
So if someone wishes to move that the district write a letter of support for 988 crisis support, that would be sufficient.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
I will move that. Thank you. CO McPherson.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Thick. You had your hand up.
No, that's fine. I was just going to second it.
Oh, you were going to second it. Okay, there you go. Councillor McMaster seconded. All in favor? Or sorry, any further comments? All in favor? None opposed? It's carried. Any other comments on the correspondence? Go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Sorry, I'm not trying to take over the airtime, but I do think that the letter that's contained in 7.10 is an opportunity for you as the new mayor, perhaps to have a conversation with VHA. And I think it would be really timely. They're offering congratulations, but perhaps it's an opportunity to actually make known to them some of our concerns and some of the things that have been brought forward by Councillor Steer to the ACRD. I think it's just, it might be a really timely conversation to have with them. So I'm just encouraging the mayor to perhaps respond by phone call to VHA in response to the letter.
And this was for 7.1, the VAC. Sorry, did you say 7.1, Councillor Thick?
Yeah, in relation to the correspondence from VHA.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I was actually going to respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank
I
you.
will do that now. Actually, I will do it in order here. I was going to respond to the personal letter of congratulation. And I'll do that first to Ted Olenek from BC Hydro. Thank you, and I look forward to meeting with you and working with you. And also a congratulatory letter from Mayor Noel from Ucluelet. And I quite look forward to working with Mayor Noel in the future and Yuki Council. And thank you, Councillor Thick, for reminding me about Island Health. I do thank both Leah and Kathy, Leah Hollins and Kathy McNeil, for the letter of congratulations and bringing up the importance of community health and resiliency. And I do look forward to meeting and chatting with either or of them and working with Island Health. So thank you both. Thank you all. Anything else for correspondence? Okay, moving on. We have presentations and reports. And we have an invited presentation from Ian Scott, Executive Director of Tofino Housing Corporation. Ian, are you on? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lowe, and congratulations. Congratulations to new Councillor Challenger as well. It's great to be with you guys again. I thought, given some of the business we have upcoming, it would be important to come and formally introduce and say hello to the new council. And of course, Councillor Thick, you're back again. Nice to see you again in this role. And so I just have a very brief presentation just to let you know what's coming at you here in the next little bit from the Tofino Housing Corporation perspective. So I'm just going to share my screen. and believe you can see my screen now. See if I can't get it onto slideshow mode. So just wanted to touch on 4 items really quickly. One is our board appointments. Looking at ways that we might build a stronger and ongoing dialogue between the board and the corporation and with council, and then highlight some of the 2021 priorities that the board and myself will be working on as we go through this coming year. So for those new to council, but also just as a reminder, THC is a wholly owned subsidiary of the District of Tofino. So the only share of the corporation is owned by the district. So what that means is our governance is decided by the District of Tofino as its only owner. So that means yourselves. Board members do serve as individuals rather than appointees. So Duncan McMaster is currently on our board as Duncan McMaster, not as Councillor McMaster. What that means is Andrea McQuaid is still on the THC board until we have new appointments and reappointments. The governance structure that is a choice of the district. When it was restarted in 2017, we had 5 district representatives. That was 3 elected officials and 2 staff. In 2019, based on some recommendations from the board, we altered the governance and council endorsed 4 district representatives, so 3 elected officials and 1 staff, and 3 community representatives. In 2020, because Mayor Osborne won the election, Josie Osborne had to resign, and the board appointed Nyla Atiana to the board up until the time of reappointments. Our articles of incorporation look at the board appointing any vacancies during the year. And of course, last year we tragically had the passing of Councillor Baird. That occurred right near the end of our cycle, and so then council turned their mind to reappointments last year. The board is appointed at each AGM, and we hold our annual general meeting as part of a council meeting, and we intend to do that on April the 27th. The district representatives, Duncan McMaster and Bob McPherson, have both said they're willing to stay on. Cindy Levine, Melody McClory, and Kay Mellowship, our community representatives, have also indicated they would be interested in staying on. Kay Mellowship, some of you might not be familiar with. She is the executive director of the Greater Victoria Housing Society, and we recruited Kay to our board given her experience. Cindy and Melody, I think, are both known to many people in the community. So really what that means is we have 2 vacant slots. If we continue with a board of 7 people, we don't have to do it that way. It could be 5, 6, 8. There's no specific number that is necessary. But 7 has worked well, but we could increase it or decrease it if so chosen. And I know in speaking with CAO McPherson that considering what are going to be the council appointments, even though this is not a council appointment, it's obviously a role that takes some time. And it would really be best if sort of agreed to who's going to be on the board by the time we get to the AGM, because you do need to agree to be on the board. That can happen after the meeting on the 27th, but it's easier if it happens before. So I'd like you to turn your attention to who will be joining our board, whether that's staff or council, or whether we want to invite additional community representatives. Obviously, right now, the way it's structured is district representatives are the majority. Of course, you're reappointing the board every year. So whether it really is the majority or not, I think you're still well in control of the corporation. One of our strategic priorities from our strategic plan is to build better and relationships with relevant organizations, and one of those is council. And so the 2 ways we think that could happen well is, 1, invite a council member to each of our board meetings. So a council member who's not on the board to come and witness our business and participate in the discussion. And or we can do more frequent meetings at updates at committee of the whole or otherwise. So our next meeting is April 12th at 9:30. And we would like somebody from council to attend that meeting who's not on the board, but also maybe isn't considering on being appointed to the board on the 27th. Meetings, we hold them about every 8 weeks, usually Monday at 9:30, and these are the dates that we have set for the remainder of the year. and through Cass Spence, I can make sure the councillors get these dates, and you can work amongst yourselves to pick and choose which meeting you'd like to be at. Of course, we can have more than one council member there, but it's really not, it is a separate board, so it'd be better if just one councillor came at a time. And then also invite, and for discussion amongst council on your own, whether holding another council workshop like we did about a year or so ago, or you know, schedule some more extended presentations at committee of the whole to give you updates along the way. For 2021, so the new board members and our current board, these are the things we're working on. Sharp Road, as you know, is under construction. Our role as a housing corporation is pretty much complete, so really we're just monitoring the process at this point. Catalyst is entirely responsible for tenant selection, but of course we're interested that it's done properly and in accordance with the housing agreement and our lease. So we'll monitor that process. The north apartment building on DL 114 was selected by BC Housing, and we should be in construction by summer or fall of this year, provided the additional approvals required by both CMHC and BC Housing go according to plan. We're expecting an announcement mid to end of May for the south apartment, whether that'll also be selected in this round of funding by BC Housing. So that might start then in 2022. The DL 114 duplexes will be doing the detailed design this year, although we are faced with some money constraints given the lack of tourism in Tofino and the MRDT being a bit lower still. As everyone, I think we're expecting that to pick up as vaccines roll out and people feel safe to travel and are allowed to do so. We'll be participating in the housing needs assessment being coordinated by the district. We need to renew our MRDT agreement with the district. Our agreement runs out in May of 2022 in line with the 5-year cycle. So we need to work with the council and staff on that. We want to initiate some of these regional conversations with the District of Tla-o-qui-aht and the First Nations. Are there ways to collaborate? Is it just information sharing? We need to really, if we're going to meet our strategic goal of 150 rental units and 30 price restricted resident restricted units, which is a mouthful, but basically ownership units by 2030, we need to find where our next project locations will be. We settled on some project locations in 2018, and should be done all that construction by 2023, 2024. So that's about a 6-year cycle. So if we're to meet that 2030 goal, we really need to settle on a location in the next year or so to meet that goal by 2030. And that target means 78 more rental units and 24 more price restricted unis, or units. Small typo on the screen. And you know, and finally, you know, I think we have just released a primer targeted at members of the community who are asking questions about eligibility for both Sharp Road. I think I've had counting now about 10 emails in regards to Sharp Road. Can I buy a unit at Sharp Road? No, Sharp Road is rental only, but we are looking at other locations for price restricted housing. But if you look to the end of 2022, our funding has been structured or will be structured this way. So for the projects, development cost charge waivers equaling about $300,000, district reserve transfers. So that was money that was sitting in district reserves in 2017 when the Housing Corporation restarted, but then also through the sale of Sea Otter and Gateway, we've received those transfers. MRDT by the end of 2022, I estimate to be about $930,000. Grants, so that's BC Housing, Rural Dividend Fund, CMHC, just over $9 million, and then land value of about $3.5 million. So if we look forward, we have both a land question, but a money question. And that's because the district reserve transfers, that's sort of done unless you negotiate additional money from developers. The grants, we did get $500,000 from Rural Dividend Fund. I'm not sure we'll be successful a second time with that, as well as if we're building more price restricted housing, there isn't a grant program existing for those. So either we have to fund it or we have to build only at cost. And then we have this land question. Some members of council and members of the public have questioned whether we should continue to pursue further development on DL 114 after this first phase. And if that's the case, and if that is decided that's not a community priority or objective, we have to find a way to probably purchase land because there aren't other district land resources. So that land question is tied up in a money question, then how do we still deliver on our target? And so these will be issues that we have to discuss at the board level, but as well with council over the coming year or 2 years. So with that, say thank you and can take any questions, or you can just say goodbye to me and I'll be back on the 27th.
Thank you, Ian. Can you shut off your presentation for us? There we go. That way I can see everybody. Fantastic. Do we have council have questions for Ian? Any questions? Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Law. It's not so much a question for Ian, it's more, there was sort of a request from Ian and Tofino Housing Corporation around appointments to the THC board for the upcoming AGM on the 27th. And I don't know if this would be the appropriate time to have that discussion, and I don't know what the timeframes are, and I might look to Elise to see when our next committee of the whole, and if it would be in time to go committee of the whole and enough time to go to forward it to council meeting and then to the AGM if that timing works. And maybe a more appropriate venue might be at the committee of the whole. Then we can bring those discussions, have those discussions probably in a more or a less formal format, and then bring that to council to bring forward to the Tofino Housing Corporation. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Councillor Steer. Hi, Council, Mayor and Council. You do have a committee of the whole meeting on April 19th, and I think that there is typically sufficient time for us to get the minutes together to be submitted to the next council meeting after that, which is the 27th, the date of your AGM for the Tofino Housing Corporation. I'll note that at the April 27th meeting, we're also planning to bring forward all of council's appointments. So since the election of new members, council may wish to review all appointments, that's internal and external as well. So an opportunity to discuss that at a committee of the whole meeting before the decisions are made at council is a good idea. And staff can certainly work towards that, just to put the item on the COW agenda if that's something council would like to see.
Great. I would then defer to the rest of council to see if that if there's an appetite for doing that at this point.
I'll open that up to council.
I do.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think that makes sense to have it at the committee of the whole when the rest of the delegations are coming up.
I concur. Anybody else? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, now that we have new council members and a new mayor, there may be a whole number of, well, not a lot, but there may be more than one committee and different appointments that need to be made. I'm wondering if that can all come forward at once. Maybe the mayor can get together with staff and sort of have a look at that.
And bring them forward to the committee of the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that is a good plan. Councillor Chalmers, did you had your hand up there?
I was just agreeing, thank you.
Okay. I think that's a good idea, actually. I think I'll certainly meet with staff and I'll also meet with each councillor if to see where the councillors are at with their positions on committees and boards, and we'll bring that to the committee of the whole. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, just look forward to seeing that come forward. The other thing that from Ian's presentation was seeking interest from councillors in attending some of the board meetings for the THC. And yeah, I would be interested, and I think it's a good idea that all councillors and attend some of those meetings. We've had our council appointments on the board, but I don't think we've had the rotating meetings of councillors. So I think it would be good to go in rotation just so that we can watch the business of the board being conducted and also receive the updates that we usually do. So yeah, good idea. I support it.
Any other councillors want to speak to that motion? It's not a motion, but the idea. Yes, Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because I think the more council understands what happens with the Tofino Housing Corporation, the better. Housing is one of the biggest concerns in this community, and Tofino Housing Corporation is responsible for spending a lot of public funds. So I think the more awareness of what the Tofino Housing Corporation does, the better.
Yeah, I concur. I think it's a great idea to do a rotating board meeting with or rotating councillors with board meetings, just to get everybody on the inside there and aware. Councillor Challenger.
Thanks, Mayor Law. So the first meeting, I believe, was April 12th. That was the invitation was for. And since that's before the committee of the whole meeting and our next council meeting, I'd be happy to attend that as councillor.
Great. And how would we structure that, Elise, to get a rotating attendance for council?
Council can make a motion right now. There were several dates proposed by Mr. Scott, and if he could refresh our memories maybe on those dates, then everyone could have a look at them. I think he mentioned that his preference would be for those of you not looking to join the board to express that interest. But if you don't know that yet, if council needs some more time to consider who would like to join the board, you don't have to make this type of decision right now. And that could be done at the April 19th meeting. But I do appreciate Councillor Challenger's offer to attend the first meeting, which will happen, as she said, prior to the April 19th COW meeting, where you can discuss the board appointments a little bit more. So this could come forward with the April 19th discussion of all appointments, including the THC discussion, if that was your wish.
Great. Yes, Councillor McMahon.
Yeah, I would support Councillor Challenger attending the first meeting and then deciding once the representatives have been elected to the board who attends the next meetings.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Challenger, for stepping up. Any other comments for Ian? Any questions or comments for Ian? No. Thank you very much, Ian. Thanks for your presentation. We look forward to, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Sorry, Councillor Mayor Law. It's not for Ian. It was just I don't know if we had moved to bring this forward to if we needed a motion to bring it to the committee of the whole before we conclude it. That was all I was going to put my hand up for.
We don't need a motion. We can just put that on the agenda for you.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Look forward to working with you all.
Great. Okay, 8.2 zoning bylaw amendment, shipping containers. I believe we have a report from community sustainability.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'll just share my screen here. Great. I'm assuming you can all see that. Today I'll be presenting a zoning amendment for second reading concerning shipping containers. I'll just give a little bit of a brief background on this as we have new members of council and a new mayor. The shipping container zoning amendment came from a form and character concern So we had some new containers introduced to the district in the downtown core, and that raised a concern with council. Staff then spent some time looking into form and character concerns, and then went a little bit deeper into our research. Realized that there was a fair number of complaints about concerns about shipping containers, and as well as some significant safety issues. And so, taking all that information, we came back to council last June for our first reading of a zoning amendment bylaw to regulate shipping containers within the District of Tofino. So in terms of the regulation, we were looking to apply a consistent approach across the municipality. And that consistent approach consists of treating shipping containers as storage units with appropriate safety measures in place. Those safety measures would be primarily ventilation, what can be stored in the containers, and ensuring egress from the containers. The regulations would be nested within our existing zoning bylaw in terms of setbacks, height, and lot coverage, and then also be subject to development permit conditions across the district, but primarily in the downtown core. I should also mention that the 2021 OCP also includes some language about how and where those can be placed in any of the downtown core development permit areas. Following first reading, the process was to then go out to the community through a consultation process and try to get some feedback about the proposed amendment. There were 6 primary concerns or questions raised by the community, aggregated by me. There's a detailed or a more detailed analysis of that can be found in the report in front of council today, but I'll just go through these fairly quickly and mention briefly what staff feels about each of these concerns. So the first concern raised was the district doesn't support containers for residential housing or commercial uses. In fact, we would support containers for residential housing and commercial uses if those containers were developed under a building permit and subject to the regulations of any building. So a stick frame building is treated the same as a container for the purposes of residential housing. We had some concerns about existing commercial uses. Any container that's currently operating under a valid permit will be allowed to continue that use under the conditions of that permit. We had a question about whether shipping containers require foundations. They would require foundations if they were for an occupancy, so for residential or commercial occupancy, most likely would require a foundation. In terms of storage, they most likely do not require a foundation. This will be sort of determined at the time by the building inspector, but these obviously containers are built as storage that don't require the foundations. They use each other for foundations, and so for the storage use, they would not require foundations. We heard some concerns that regulation of shipping containers is unnecessary, and that's definitely an opinion. Staff is working under the direction of council to look into this, and again in our research, uncovered some significant safety issues that we'd like to take care of. We've had some concerns that shipping containers unsightly. I would say that's balanced out with the number of people who actually who don't mind them and want them as storage. And so we tried to balance those two needs through the regulation in terms of where they were allowed to be placed and under what conditions they'd be allowed to be placed, specifically in the downtown core. And finally, we had some concerns that shipping containers should only be permitted on larger lots. Again, looked in, spent a bit of time with this one, and in the end, it came down to just a fairness and used the existing regulations to determine whether one of these containers could be fit on a lot or not. So those are the 6 primary concerns. There were a number of other suggestions and questions that the report details a little bit more. And so, in terms of recommendations for council today, staff did not identify any showstoppers through our consultation process. So today we're looking for councils to give the bylaw a second reading and also to waive the public hearing as the proposed amendment meets up with the OCP policy. And that's it for me this evening. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Aaron. I'll open it up to council. Questions or comments? Councillor Anderson.
Hi, thanks for your report, Aaron. I did a bit of reviewing of some other municipalities and their regulations around shipping containers. So I'm glad to see that some of those things are captured. The ventilation and egress is of particular concern to me because you can't get out of a shipping container once the doors are shut. In their basic form. So that presents the same type of danger as I think in the past there's been regulations created around the disposal of things like deep freezers and refrigerators where particularly children may get trapped inside them. So I think that's an important consideration. I'm wondering, I noticed that in some residential lots, there's been shipping containers located outside of the setbacks, so they're right adjacent to the property line, as far as I can tell. So I don't know if the bylaw would go back and maybe correct some of those situations. Since the bylaw is suggesting that they would be subject to setbacks. Some municipalities regulate them in the same way that they regulate buildings. So I'm not sure why they do that. I'd like to explore that a little bit more. I'm wondering too if we can, if there's any interest from council or from staff in just limiting the total number of shipping containers that might be located on a lot. I'm not really satisfied with this sort of 5% of area or 62 square meters. That I think that could allow for maybe more shipping containers than we might want used for storage in some places. Particularly, I think the concerns are around residential areas. I think that's industrial areas and places that are covered by development permit. There's opportunity for the public to sort of come to terms with how they might fit and how they might look on those lots. But in residential areas, it's more of a problem. There's more room for conflict from neighbors, and then also what can be done in those in terms of noise and smells that might be coming from shipping containers could also create conflict. So those are some of the concerns. The other thing I noticed in some other municipalities, they almost always require screening of shipping containers. So I'm not sure how far we want to go with that, but those are the things that came up when I looked at other bylaws. So that's all I have right now.
Councillor McMaster.
Just a question for Aaron. I couldn't see it in your report. I know I'd addressed the footprint of the containers. Are you going to allow these containers to be stacked on top of each other? That way, because it would still have the same footprint. But you have. Are we going to have a height restriction, basically?
I'm just looking at the bylaw itself. So in the bylaw amendment itself, under 10AV, it says a shipping container shall not exceed 4.5 meters in height. So it's about, what would that be? It's about 15 feet, which is what they are standard. It does not say in the regulations that they cannot be stacked.
So does so you could have two containers of 4.5 meters high stacked on top of one another?
I think if someone would decide to do that, they may be able to get away with that. Yeah.
What does the rest of council think for a height restriction?
Councillor Thick and then Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you. I realize I wasn't here for the first reading, but I do remember conversations that our council had in regards to the Campbell Street shipping containers, which has actually turned out fairly well, in my opinion. However, I really, at this moment, I feel that I would be not inclined to support the second reading as it stands right now. For three main reasons. And number one is I read through the report and I see that in the public feedback section, there was 9 to 10 references of using industrial land only. So that leads me to believe that people are in agreement with the use of these containers in that specific zone. So that's something I would support. Secondly, it's also referenced in the report that the OCP just adopted in 2021. It says that the OCP, quote, discourages the use of shipping containers for residential, commercial, and individual occupancies. And that's from page 76. And that addresses the aesthetic component that has been wrestled with, in years past, and seems to be still a concern now. And thirdly, the safety aspect is referenced in the report where it says on page 74 that the District of Tofino building inspector has expressed safety concerns regarding their use. So, in conclusion for me, I feel not inclined to support this second reading. I would be inclined to support the use of shipping containers in the industrial area of our town. So when we read on the report, and I know that we say this often, but the financial impacts, the amendments are not anticipated to financially impact the district. From what I've just read and understood, I would say that they do actually impact the district financially in terms of our salaried professional staff, because if we do allow them to be in the downtown core, then there is going to be a lot more work, it seems, for the building inspector and the planner. And it seems to me from reading those comments, and it's hard to read them because they're all highlighted in red, but it does seem to be, there seems to be fairly quite a consensus about the concern of aesthetics. So for those 3 or 4 reasons, I would say that I would not be inclined to support this second reading as it stands right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. Just to clarify, Mr. Rogers, that these are not being used for occupancy. This is just storage, just a note on Councillor Thick's comments there.
Correct. Just for store, the regulations concern storage only. If they were to be another type of occupancy, they would have to go through a building permit process. If there was a new zone created, then the OCP does discourage this as being, something that can be built at the point. But in terms of our current zone, if someone applied for a building permit and wanted to use a container, then they could go through that process. But this specific amendment is to regulate their use of storage without a building permit.
So just one more question there, Mr. Rogers, and it was, we do have shipping containers being used at the present time on residential lots, do we not?
There are, I'm aware of a number of units on residential and commercial lots. All of those are unregulated currently.
Councillor Thick, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, just to clarify that I made my comments based on that understanding that this was, even with the proviso of being a storage container, I still do not support the reading, and I would support, with all the legal implications that have been mentioned in the report, I would support those containers on Industrial Way, but I would not support those in any other zone. Thank you.
Councillor Chalmers, go ahead.
I have a question for Mr. Rogers and then a follow-up. The shipping containers that we have in the downtown core, those are all, they had to have a I've just forgot the word, a form and character, didn't they? So they've had to add awnings and signs to kind of make them a little bit more presentable.
Yeah, they were developed under a development permit process, so they had to get a development permit. They also have building permits, so they're a little bit different, and those weren't converted containers. They were structures built to look like containers, and so, and had to go through our building permit process. So, in form, they're, I should say, in character and form, they are shipping containers, but they weren't used to ship grain or back and forth. They were purpose built that way.
So anything put on our more visible areas are kind of in that area where we do have form and character, isn't it? Like most of the downtown or.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I am in support of this as is, and I know a lot of struggles with small businesses in this town is storage and how to have office space or to get a business going, looking at some of the electric bike proposals that we've seen. And I think they do offer a good solution for startups, small businesses that we like to support. And I think that, with that in mind, yeah, I'm supportive as is, and I appreciate that we're looking at the health and safety of them.
Thank you. Just for clarification, Mr. Rogers, we've got several councillors made some comments about setbacks, the number of containers, residential screening, and please jump in here, Councillor Anderson. And we also had comments about stacking, and also another comment from Councillor McMaster about industrial land only. If we, what are the options here for going forward? If we go ahead with second reading, can some of these issues be addressed for third reading, or?
I'd always defer to Ms. Coacher Bergman about this, but I think that if there are changes that want to be made, that will not want to give the bylaw for second reading today, and have staff come back with an amended bylaw based on council's direction today.
So just want to maybe go back through council very quickly. We had some issues, the stacking issue, setbacks, number of containers, and of course, Councillor Thick's opposition. Do we want to go do one more quick run through before we make a motion? And maybe Aaron, you can comment on some of those things. Go ahead, Councillor McMaster.
With reference to stacking containers, I don't have such an issue in an industrial area, but if it's being in a residential area where it's being used for storage, I would prefer not to see stacking.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, my concerns are mainly focused around residential areas as well. In commercial areas that are covered by development permit, I think we can cover off some of the aesthetics of them and the meeting safety requirements, etc. It's the residential zonings that, and I think the report says that they would be allowed in all residential zonings. I think that's where the most room for conflict is. So that I'd like to see. I think I support Councillor McMaster's idea that they shouldn't be stacked. I think screening or some sort of treatment to the outside of the shipping container should be required in a residential area, that setbacks should be adhered to, and those, and also the numbers be limited, or the square footage limited in a little bit greater way. And yeah, that's the main concerns I have are in the residential areas.
Councillor Challenger.
Thank you. I have a question and then a comment as well. To clarify the item 10A4, which Councillor McMaster spoke to as well, the combined gross floor area of shipping containers plus accessory buildings shall not exceed 5% of the lot or 62 square meters, whichever the greater. Is that saying 5% of the lot or 5% of 62 square meters? Is that understood correctly?
It's a 5% of the lot. It's actually a clause from our existing zoning bylaw. So our existing zoning bylaw, that's right out of the bylaw for accessory buildings. And that's the current restriction. And what we've done is just added containers into there. So someone couldn't add containers in addition to the 5% they're currently allowed. They would be allowed to do a total of 5%. So that's not the only thing changed there, is that we made sure that storage containers are included as accounted like an accessory building.
Okay, and so if there was a huge, a very big lot, then that limits it to be 5% of 62 square meters maximum?
5% of the lot size, or 62. I was going to look at the number, or 62 total, whichever is large, whichever is a greater.
So the containers could cover 62 square meters.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. Thank you. And I am in support of shipping containers used for storage, but agree that in residential lots, I can see concerns coming up from neighbors and that of the aesthetics and how that changes the aesthetic of residential neighborhoods, and understand that might be a place where there are further restrictions.
Okay, I think we've heard some comments. So my feeling is that generally overall it's to go forward, but with some amendments to deal with residential shipping containers on residential lots, stacking, setbacks, screening and cladding, and the square footage, I believe, for residential lots. Is that sound right? Mr. Rogers, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry to do this, but I'm going to need to go through and get a list of everything that I need to look at. I think this will involve reviewing this again and then going back for further consultation, because the original consultation of the bylaw was based off the specifics of first reading. And if we're going to change that, we're going to have to go back to consultation, which is great. I just want to make sure that I'm taking off the boxes that I need to take off. So screening, is that a general nod from everybody that you want me to look at screening in residential areas? Yes, I get nods. The density on residential lots, currently it's based on our accessory building density. Is that something that we want to change, or do we want to limit it in specific zones? Do I just have a little bit of an idea?
Councillor Chalmers. You're muted. You're muted.
I think I pressed it twice. I'm not sure if everybody will agree with me on this one, but for myself, I'm comfortable with the 5% there as an accessory building, using just a different type of building, especially for looking at the screening and the rest of it. So for me, I'd like that to stay as is.
I would agree. Anybody else? For Mr. Rogers, is that okay?
Okay, so I'm taking density off. Great. Stacking, I think we're all in agreement to review that under that. The industrial land only concern is that, do we want to go back and look at where these can, what types of zones these can occur in?
I think. Go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, I guess the reason I said that was because, you know, it's getting pretty complicated, and I guess I'm trying to simplify. And I also did some research as Councillor Anderson suggested, and I looked at what best practices were in different places, and it was all the evidence that I found were in big open places that had large amounts of land. And so that's why I thought, you know, it's really hard when you get down to all these, you can do it here, but you can't do it there. It's got to be this height, this, you know, people, you know, we know from experience that people break all those rules. So I'm just suggesting that, you know, my amendment would be, I don't know if it's something that people would agree to, but would be that it would be in the industrial zone only. So that's my comment, and that's what I would like to see, but I'm not sure what others feel about that.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I haven't weighed in because there's many factors here, but that's one that I will weigh in on. It is an affordable reality for many people that these storage containers do provide that exact purpose on many residential lots. So I wouldn't be in favor of just having it zoned only for industrial zoned areas. I think it has to be a broader area that these are allowed, as is currently being used by many residential properties at this time for affordable storage opportunities, as opposed to building a storage container of any other material. So I wouldn't be supportive of it only in a zoned area for industrial.
Yeah, I'd just like to pipe into here that I mean, the purpose of this is mostly for residential areas. I think that's part of the larger purpose of this bylaw. But go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
I would like to say that I agree with Councillor Steer there. But I also appreciate what Councillor Thick did say.
Thank you. Councillor Steer, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to that original, when this was brought towards council, it did stem initially from some parts of, but there was a residential component that was a part of those recommendations, and it was I believed it was understood that was the gist of part of that recommendation for staff to come back and report to council on. So I had in the back of my mind that residential was an essential part of this whole discussion that we were having.
Okay, I think that's, did we make it through the list there, Mr. Rogers?
I believe so. I think so. I have two items that I'm going to look back to review again. We'll be screening and the stackability of these, and so I will take a look at that, get back to the consultation, and have that brought back to council sometime in the future.
Councillor Steer, thank you, Mr.
And sorry, thank you, Mayor Law. And Aaron, I believe there was around the setbacks, and I'm not sure if those are already inclusive within the zoning bylaws, that we already have those regulations in place. So I don't know if it's necessary for that to be reviewed on this, but I do remember that being brought up in this discussion.
Great, thank you. I'm just sharing my screen quickly, just so we can all. This is the regulation as currently written. So it does contain setbacks in accordance with provisions of the principal buildings. Also some regulations about how close they can be to buildings. And some of these, again, will actually line up exactly with what our accessory building regulations are. The intent was to try to bring them into that accessory building and umbrella.
That was my understanding. Thank you.
Councillor McMaster.
Just going back to that comment about in accordance with the primary buildings, what if an exemption has been made in the past for the setback for that primary building? Does the container get the same exemption?
no, generally variances are specific to the, unless they're written poorly, to the building in place. So if the way that we've been writing zoning for the last 15 years is that we'll take the specific building, vary that portion of it, and actually have it on a survey, so that we're not varying a whole setback line just for that specific area of a building. So any future building that went in and would need to be varied would come to council first.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Councillor Anderson.
Your presentation, you made reference to ventilation and egress for safety, but the bylaw itself doesn't contain anything that I can see on that. Where would that be captured?
So on part B, it says what can be stored there. So that's the storage of it. And the ventilation part would be dealt with the building inspector, not through the zoning bylaw.
So it would require a building permit to locate one on a residential lot then?
No, it does not.
How would the building inspector capture that then?
Most likely word of mouth. I'm not sure that the problem with shipping containers is they're not buildings, so we can't regulate them. And the use and density is what you do with zoning. So we're kind of caught in this in between method. So we're working with the building inspector to educate the building community and the local community about the regulations here. I know that Mr. Henderson has had these conversations with a number of people with shipping containers, but we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with these because they're not buildings, and what we're regulating is not a use. So that's kind of where we live right now. We've talked to the fire department about training for members as well, but that's the sort of the education part where we try to work with the community on these.
Okay, just one last comment then.
Yep.
In Maple Ridge, they actually do consider them to be buildings, and that's the only way they're permitted. So they have to meet regulations. They have actually diagrams of what type of ventilation is workable for them, and some things around that. So I don't know if I would support this coming forward without those safety concerns being addressed. They just run the risk of having somebody trapped in there, possibly with no air if they're really well sealed. I don't know. So it's and other municipalities have dealt with them in that way. So I'd have to hear some strong arguments not to have those safety concerns addressed before I would support it. So that's all I have now.
Mr. Rogers, do current accessory buildings besides shipping containers have to adhere to ventilation and egress?
They would be constructed under the BC building code. So any of the safety measures of the code, which are many, would be required for an accessory building, apart from something that is 10 by 10 and meant to be like a greenhouse or something like that. But yeah.
So these are, Councillor Anderson does have a good point. These are fairly unique.
For sure, the District of Tofino could regulate these the same way that we would require a building permit if they were to become a residential occupancy or commercial occupancy and they're treated as a building. We definitely can do that. It's beyond the scope of this initial conversation with council at first reading, but happy to go back and look at that if that's the will of council. It in some ways is less complicated in the sense that we would classify it as a building, and then someone could bring those in and they'd have to go through a building permit process. We would most likely have to, and again, maybe we could piggyback on a Maple Ridge, but decide how we were going to inspect something that's already constructed. And I know that we've had issues in the past with buildings being constructed without approvals in place about how far we can go with our inspections. And so as far as I understand, containers live in that same area. It's difficult to inspect something that comes in place. So
Councillor McMaster.
I think we've got to be take a look at ourselves here and know what's going in town. Somebody is definitely going to rent out space in a container when they have it on the lot for accommodation during the summer, whether they're allowed to or not. So we may as well try and make them as safe as possible. It is going to happen.
I think we're I think we're getting beyond what the original bylaw was covering here. Quite beyond it. Kathy, Councillor Stick.
Yeah, I really hear what Councillor Anderson is saying here, and I think that there's, you know, there seems to be, as we delve into this and ask more questions, there seems to be more that we don't know than what we do know. And once we cross this line and we say we're going to do this, you know, it's really, really hard to go back. And you know, if I don't know, if I wanted to live in Surrey and look at containers or live in an industrial park, that's where I'd go. But I didn't go there. I came to Tofino, you know, to be a part of something else and something much better and grander. And I just feel that it's a bit of a slippery slope here. And I do hear these concerns about safety as well. And I think, you know, if I was a volunteer on the fire department, there's no way that I would want to attend a call to something that going into a space that, you know, I didn't know that had been certified or legally approved or met the building code. I think it also undermines the building code. So I think, yeah, there's just a few more questions here than I guess I anticipated, and I still feel the same, that I can't support it in its current in the current form.
Okay. I think we're going to have to. I think we're going to actually have to move on from this topic pretty quick here. Just how to move on is the question. So we've got quite a diverse set of opinions. Mr. Rogers, from what you've heard from council, do you have options for us? Okay, sorry, Mr. McPherson.
So if I may,
Please.
Council very clearly wants to refer this back to staff. I think that Mr. Rogers has done a good job of, you know, consolidating as much as we can. There are differences of opinion on council, and we'll bring something back that we think the majority of council is looking for, and once again, council can have another crack at it in a number of weeks. So I think we're good if council would simply like to refer this matter back to staff.
I think we do that. I think we've referred it back to staff. And do we need a motion to do that? Yes, we do. Would somebody like to motion to refer this back to staff with all the notes that Mr. Rogers has taken?
I'll move that this bylaw be referred back to staff.
Seconder, Councillor Anderson. Any further comments on this or discussion? All in favor? None opposed. This motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for that, all that work. Thank you very much. 8.3, we have by-election results and lessons learned, and we have a report from Corporate Services.
Good evening. I'm just going to share my screen. Just a moment. Okay. Hoping that everyone can see the first slide of my presentation. So tonight's presentation will be, I'll run through the first part of it fairly quickly, as I think most of you are aware of the official results of the recent by-election, and then we'll jump into a bit of a review of how the project went and allow some time for questions and comments at the end. So the purpose of my report, like I said, is twofold, just to share the results and then outline those lessons learned. So background, I think, again, as most of you are aware, a by-election was held for the office of mayor and 2 council seats using 3 different voting opportunities. One advanced voting day, we used mail ballots for the first time, and we had general voting day. And this report is being presented because the Local Government Act requires that within 30 days of declaring the results of the election, the CEO, which was myself, I must submit a report on the election results, which includes a compilation of the ballot accounts, and those are attached to your package tonight as Appendix 1 to this report. So again, the results of the election, as you can see before you, this was for the office of mayor, and this is compiled based on the ballot accounts that, again, they were attached to your package tonight as Appendix 1 to the report. So the individuals with the highest number of valid votes were declared elected, and that was Dan Law for the office of mayor and Jackie Challenger and Kathy Thick for the offices of councillor. This is what we call this sort of master ballot account. We do ballot accounts for every election official who is working at an election. And then myself as a CEO compiles them into one official ballot account. And it really details, it's just a real accountability measure for us as election workers. So it details the ballots received for use, all of those that were accepted by the voting machine or myself as the CEO, any spoiled and replaced ballots, and everything that was issued to electors, as well as anything that was unused or not accounted for. And this year, using mail ballots, our ballot accounts look a little bit different in that I wouldn't normally want to ever see ballots not accounted for, but what's in that column there is only mail-in ballots. And so those are ballots that are sent to electors and not returned by the deadline on general voting day. And we have received a few of those come in since general voting day, but not all of them are accounted for. And this number represents what was not accounted for on general voting day. Voter turnout. And I just kind of love this slide because Tofino has such an engaged population. And I think we can all agree that the turnout on general voting day was fantastic. And we'll get to the lessons learned from that great turnout later on. But how this is calculated is we used to use the numbers available from Civic Info BC, but now that we use the provincial voters list, we just use the number of people who are on the provincial voters list who list Tofino as their residents. And then we add all of our registered non-resident property electors. And that gives us a total number of registered voters at 1,803. And we had 907 ballots cast for a turnout of exactly 50%, which is great when you think about that the average turnout across British Columbia in 2018 general local elections was 36%. And to put that in perspective, general elections typically have a much higher turnout than a by-election. So a 50% turnout during a by-election is fantastic. Now to just give a bit of a review of the mail ballot process. As I said earlier, this was our first time using mail ballots. We amended the election procedures bylaw in 2018 to allow for their use, and this was our first time doing it. Generally, they are intended to increase the opportunities for non-resident property electors and electors whose mobility or health is compromised to allow them to vote without entering the voting place. However, this year we are still in the midst of a global pandemic, and we worked with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to secure a ministerial order that allowed for the extension of mail ballots to all eligible voters to reduce the necessity of in-person voting during the pandemic. So that was not typical, and we won't typically see the high number of voters using the mail ballot system, as it really is only for those folks who do not live in Tofino but own property here, or whose mobility or health is compromised. So the majority of mail ballots that were sent during this election were to residents who will typically not be eligible for that process. Just giving a highlight of sort of who and what happened here. There's a snapshot of sort of how many applications we received, how many I accepted. So that's how many were sent to voters, 88. So you can see there's a difference there. Some people applied to vote who were not eligible to vote, and that took some back and forth with voters and definitely took some time to figure out what people were submitting. And then the total number of mail ballots returned was 73, with 68 of them accepted, 4 of them rejected, and 1 of them was spoiled. And then again, we had the 15 that were not returned by voters on time to be counted in the general or in the by-election. COVID-19 protocols. This is new for us. Maybe it's not new now, but certainly new in the context of an election, not something that I'd put together before for any of the by-elections or elections that I've been involved in. And we used a contractor to help support this process who had been involved in a recent by-election elsewhere and was familiar with the type of safety plan that the province would be looking for. So extraordinary measures were required to protect the public and staff during the provincial state of emergency. And just to note that several 2020 by-elections were cancelled by the province due to their concerns about safety. So we were taking this quite seriously in terms of making sure our protocols were acceptable so as not to risk not having an election. So we made a few significant changes to what our typical voting processes would be, and that would be including the expanded mail ballot voting to reduce the demand and need for in-person voting, allowing oral declarations at the voting place to reduce touch points, so no one was touching pens if they didn't need to, and then our safety plan, which included risk elimination, engineering controls, administrative controls, as well as PPE for staff. And now we'll get into maybe what everyone's waiting for, maybe just me, but the lessons learned. And this is actually something that we do after every election, because there are always lessons to be learned from a big project like this when it involves the entire community and a high degree of potentially public scrutiny, but also just communication and logistics. So these are always learning opportunities for us. And overall, I'd like to sort of start just by saying how impressed I was with the staff that we had on election day. They all performed incredibly well under a lot of stress, and they really presented a very professional and helpful face to the community. And I hope that everyone who voted feels the same way that I do. We did note challenges at the outset of the project, and those were sort of evolving, but we noted that this was going to be a difficult one for us to pull off, and that was for a few reasons. So the uncertainty of the evolving province-wide restrictions on gatherings and events, which an election does fall into that category. Developing brand new processes. So again, mail ballots were new to us this year, as well as COVID-19. The loss of experienced previous election workers, so people that had worked with us before were not able to participate again. An anticipated high volume of mail ballot requests, tight timelines to turn those mail ballots around for staff and voters, the existing workload demands in our department, and this is true of all by-elections. You don't really get to prepare in the same way or clear your plate for an upcoming by-election. It just sort of happens in the middle of your work plan. And then the potential communications issues due to the recent provincial election, which had different processes and different requirements, which is certainly a challenge when trying to communicate to voters. And some of the mitigation measures we put in place were quite successful. We communicated with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Elections BC quite early on, and they were a really helpful resource for us, as well as other municipalities who had recently held by-elections. They had some really great lessons learned from their end. Like I said, we developed a robust COVID-19 safety plan to make sure that our staff and anyone coming to the voting places felt safe to do so. And then we engaged an experienced consultant to help develop a mail ballot process with us that would suit our community. We used multiple communication tactics to notify the public of all of these changes. And I'd say that just sort of based on social media uptake and the amount of emails we saw opened, it was quite successful. People were talking about the election quite a bit this year, so maybe it wasn't on our end that the communication was so successful, but certainly people knew about it. And then we did have curbside voting at all of our voting places to encourage those who were not able or not comfortable to still participate, even if they didn't want to come into the voting place. So I think I'll start with the biggest concern or the biggest area for lessons learned, and that was the main concern of the public was the length of time spent in line, particularly on general voting day. We did not have this problem on advanced voting day. I just wanted to outline a few of the factors that led to certainly some long lineups, and I do want to apologize to the community for anyone who was waiting in, upwards of an hour or more to vote, and I really appreciate their tenacity and patience. As well as their really good attitude towards our staff. It was much appreciated because I could tell that it was not a fun lineup to be in. So our COVID safety plan did allow only 3 voters in the main hall and 1 in the foyer, and that was meant to protect staff as well as those entering and exiting the voting place. And despite the growing lineups, although I do have the power at the time to change things or make changes to our safety plan, I decided not to, and I can certainly take responsibility for not amending the safety plan in the midst of a growing lineup. Did not feel comfortable changing the safety protocols that we had in place at the time. Social distancing may have also made the earlier lineups appear a lot longer than they were, prompting many people to return later. And I think that the longest lineups we had occurred after 6 p.m. Many people noted to us that they came earlier in the day, saw a lineup, thought that they would come back later, and the lineup was much larger when they returned. Campaign events also took place into the week of general voting, and anecdotally some voters felt that they weren't prepared to make a decision until general voting day, so they weren't able to take advantage of mail ballot or advanced voting day opportunities. Also, mail ballots were new to our community, so some people may not have felt comfortable or just didn't really understand the process this time to take advantage of them and decided to vote in person on general voting day. So those are some of the reasons, and I'm happy to talk about this further if you had any comments or questions, but maybe we'll save that to the end. This is an abbreviated list of lessons learned, maybe mostly directed at that one challenge of having such a large lineup and people having to wait so long on general voting day to cast their ballot. Adding election officials and voting stations to by-elections, especially those with a mayoral race. So we didn't actually change our staffing too much this year from what we would do in a general election. We typically engage 4 election officials plus the CEO and deputy for a total of 6. And it's interesting because actually looking back at my lessons learned, the notes I write for myself from the previous by-election as well as the general election, we had to cut staff during the day that it was really slow. We were finding that we had too many people on at the end of the day. And so the decision to engage only 3 staff was partly due to lessons learned from previous elections, but the way in which people moved through the voting place was definitely not the same as it was normally. So there was definitely a lesson learned there for if we have to conduct a by-election in a pandemic again, which I hope we don't have to do, increasing the amount of voting officials should adequately move the voters along in the process. Using the bylaw provision, which allows for an extra voting opportunity, we do have, or I should say, if I were to be the CEO again, I would have the option to include an extra advanced voting opportunity at my discretion. And I chose not to do that this time for a few reasons, but honestly, I can't think of anything other than just it felt like too much for a by-election, but clearly I think we could have used it. And that's a new provision for us that we'll look forward to using in the future. I would like to say that curbside voting could have been much more widely advertised. This is a service that we offer every year in every election, but only 1 voter took advantage of the service this year. And I would like to make that more accessible or more widely known to the community, that if you don't feel comfortable or if you have some kind of mobility issue, you do not have to enter the voting place. We are happy to come assist you at your car or, bike. That works too. And then just a lesson learned internally about mail ballot voting administration. As I said, this is our first time doing it. we established a service standard early on to send a mail ballot package within 1 day of accepting an application. And despite having less than 100 applications, this took a significant amount of staff time following up with voters, explaining the eligibility criteria, getting missing information, that kind of thing. So certainly something for us to note internally how much time that takes from my department's team. However, I will also sort of say that with the caveat that this is not a service that will be available to as many people next time due to the restrictions on mail ballot voting. It is really only for non-resident property electors and those that have mobility issues. So the vast majority of people who voted this time through the mail will likely not be eligible next time. Apparently that's all the lessons I learned. That's not true. There are many things that we take away every time and sort of write internal notes about, but maybe those are the highlights that I wanted to share with council tonight. So I'll stop sharing my screen and allow some time for questions.
Thank you very much. We have comments or questions from council. Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Law. I just wanted to commend staff, and in particular, the Chief Election Officer on the incredible job of preparing and executing a by-election during a pandemic and a new protocols for mail-in ballots and the use of the provincial voters list for the first time. I just want to thank staff and once again, in particular, the CEO for an incredible job, and congratulations, of course, to the elected officials that are here with us today.
Any other councillors? Yes. Councillor Challenger, then Councillor Thick.
Thank you. So I would second what Councillor Steer said as well. And I do have a question that, is it common practice that the advanced voting day is held before the main campaign events have taken place, or was that specific to this year?
Well, I'm trying to think back what's happened in the last few elections through the mayor. We aren't in control of the campaign events. So the advanced voting day is scheduled by legislation. I don't have any discretion around the date of that advanced voting day. It must be held, gosh, I want to say, somehow I have all of the quick election law has escaped me right now, but it is set by legislation when we hold that day. The second advanced voting opportunity that's at the CEO's discretion is completely at my discretion. So in the future, we could look to holding that a little bit more in tandem or in recognition of campaign events, because those are not in our control, but we could certainly work with the chamber, as they seem to be the ones who organize those types of things, to make sure that it's held after any sort of major debates or discussions among candidates.
Thank you. Yeah, that I heard the same thing. I appreciate all of the review and lessons learned, hearing from a lot of people that they, as you said, felt they couldn't make a decision before the final voting day. So thanks.
Councillor Thick.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, thanks, Elise, for all your hard work and the staff who were with you doing all that. Certainly was a challenge. I had just had, it was a very small question, but with the mail-in ballots, do you have to sign your name?
Yes. Yes, so, you do. So there is a, oh, go ahead.
No, just interesting, because you said that, you know, that it's to account in some cases for physical or, you know, some other disability. And the reason I'm asking that is because, I mean, I just think it's such a beautiful, sweet story, but Sister Margaret really wanted to vote. And this was one of her last things that she wanted to do. And she was unable to cast that vote because Sister Anita said she could no longer sign her name. So I just was like, oh, it seems so hard. I don't want to name people's names, but it just was such a sweet, it was such a sweet thing that she wanted to do. And I just thought, well, you know, what happens if people can't actually sign their names? for one reason or another, is there any allowance for that?
Yeah, so when you vote in person, you also have to sign your name. But it's a good question about getting assistance to an elector who is voting by mail. So if she needed assistance to sign her ballot, or she's not actually signing the ballot, because we wouldn't have someone identify themselves when they're casting an anonymous ballot. It's sort of the package on the outside, and it's a declaration that everyone who votes has to make, and they must sign that they are eligible to vote. I would have to look into sort of how the province accounts for mail ballots where someone needs to be assisted in making that mark. And that's certainly something we can look into for next time.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't mean to challenge you, but thank you for your work. But I think it is a good question too.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'd like to thank staff and members of the public for persevering past the voting scheduled time, going sort of above and beyond what has ever happened probably in an election. So yeah, thanks to everyone for their perseverance to get all the votes in.
I'd like to thank you very much, and also welcome Councillor Challenger and Councillor Thick. As a result, glad to have you here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have a motion. I'm going to move from the chair that the Chief Election Officer's report titled 2021 by-election results and lessons learned dated March 23rd, 2021 be received. I have a seconder. Councillor Anderson. Any further comments, questions? All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. We have 8.4, Bylaw Notice of Dispute Amendment Bylaw Report from Protective Services. Mr. Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to talk bylaws tonight. Just take one moment here and share my screen. There we go. We should all be looking at the same bear that we've seen 3 or 4 times now tonight. All right, so bylaw notice and dispute amendment. So this report presents a bylaw amendment that will increase the fines that are associated with beach fires and outdoor burning as per council resolution that staff be directed to increase fines for beach fire infractions by summer 2021. It will also outline increases to fines that are associated with traffic and parking regulation, public property use, and also align specific fines for zoning as it relates to the business licensing with corresponding sections of the zoning bylaw. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we go here. So just a little bit of background. The District of Tofino Bylaw Notice Enforcement Dispute Adjudication System Bylaw, also known as Bylaw 1107, to simplify it, applies to the contraventions that are included in the following bylaws as enacted by the District of Tofino: Outlaw Burning Bylaw, Public Property Use Regulation Bylaw, Traffic and Parking Regulation Bylaw, and the Zoning Bylaw. It also covers many more, but tonight these are the ones that we'll be referencing. So Schedule A, as attached to and forming part of this bylaw 1107, outlines fines associated with all of the other bylaws that are referenced within bylaw number 1107. So in the simplest possible terms, the other bylaws lay out the rules, and bylaw 1107 lays out the potential consequences and the fines for those bylaws. So goals of the amendment bylaw: Today's report outlines recommended amendments to Bylaw 1107 for 2 reasons. 1, to increase the fine amounts listed in Schedule A that will assist in the management of these issues during the busy summer season. And the second, the zoning bylaw number 770 has had some amendments in the last 2 years. And now Bylaw 1107 Schedule A needs some minor updates to the sections of reference so that they accurately reflect the sections in the zoning bylaw. So as in your package there, I've broken it down into specific categories so we can just go through it piece by piece. So we'll start with the increases to fines for the outdoor burning. And if we look at the table here, I apologize, it's probably a little bit small on the screens as it comes up, but I wanted to try and contain each one to its own separate table. So in the left-hand column, we've got the description of the contraventions. So these are the ones that we're updating are the most common, frequently occurring infractions. Just about every single night, potentially dozens of times a night, these issues come up, and so we're looking to increase the fines related to that. So fire contrary to ban, improperly extinguishing fire or failure to use water, covering a fire causing a hazard, failure to ensure adequate supply of water, failure to supervise fire, allowing the fire to burn after 11 p.m., campfire on Cox Bay, campfire where prohibited by signage, campfire where prohibited in general, campfire greater than 0.6 meters in diameter, and campfire burning beach material. So if we look at the table, the first column is the sections of reference within the bylaws. Next column is whether or not there's a compliance agreement available for outdoor burning. There is not. The ones that are highlighted in red there, that's what our current penalties are within Bylaw 1107. And then moving further to the right, we have the proposed new fine, new penalties, then the early payment options, and then the late payment amounts there as well. So I'll just give a minute for everybody to have a quick look through. If you have any questions, please let me know, and then we'll move on and have a look at the next one.
I do have a question. I'm not sure if you can see me on the screen.
I can now.
Thanks. Just with the allowing fires to burn after 11 p.m., I know that we have a motion coming to change that to 10 p.m. If we do this first, do we have to go back and then back again, or?
We're probably going to have to do that. You are correct that a couple of weeks from now, I will have an amendment for the outdoor burning bylaw itself, which I have been asked to, or I'm looking to limit those hours to 10 p.m. So yes, there will be a brief minor amendment to that one.
Thank you.
I also had a comment.
Go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, thanks. Line 7, where it says campfire on Cox Bay, I believe that it was in, I thought it was still in the bylaw that it was the campfire was prohibited on Cox Bay and Tonquin Beach. So that's what's posted here at Tonquin Beach. And I believe it's been in the bylaw for a long, long time. And should that be added on line 7?
I don't have a particular line number on my slide here.
I'm just referring to campfire on Cox Bay because
yeah, absolutely. So what these ones here that we're dealing with, as I mentioned, are ones that we are seeing the most frequency in, and sometimes dozens of times per night. And those are the ones that we've chosen to focus on.
Well, yeah.
So
25 years of fires on Tonquin Beach led to that being included in the bylaw. So
absolutely. And at this point, I have mostly been focusing on the ones that are really taking on an abundance of resources to try and stay on top of, and ones that we're having consistent problems with. We can absolutely look at that one. However, for the last couple of years while I've been in this role, it has not been an ongoing issue and has not required a lot of resources. We've had quite a bit of success down there. And so it's not one that I was focused on at this point, but it is always something that can be revisited. But again, this one was mostly to deal with the ones that are most frequently occurring consistently.
Right, I'm just saying if it's in the bylaw, shouldn't it be noted there? That's all. It's already included, so that's just my question.
Yes, absolutely. There are lots of other items that are in the outdoor burning bylaw as well too, and we were strictly focusing on the ones that have been the most problematic at this point. And but yes, it is in there as well.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilor McMaster, and I can't see everybody's hands, so if so, please don't wait for me to call on you.
This is related to Councillor Chalmers' comment. When we discussed the outdoor burning bylaw, we talked about restricting when you could have a fire in the morning and pushing it back to 10 o'clock or something like that. So I wondered whether that should be included in the fines for allowing fire to burn during prohibited hours rather than 11 p.m. or something like that.
Yes, so when we did have when we were at Committee of the Whole to discuss this, that was an item that you had raised, and it definitely is going to be factored into the outdoor burning bylaw amendment. I haven't specifically determined what the timeline will be, because I know there are people that do like to say go out to the beach for an early morning family surf and have a fire going perhaps prior to 10 a.m. But that will be coming to council as well.
Okay, that's fine.
So, Mr. Baker, I just want to clarify for all the councillors here that these are amendments to the existing fine structures, and that any further amendments to do with the bylaw that's coming will come at a later time. So if we can do these now, then they can be enforced sooner. Is that to get that clear for everybody?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we can always come back to this particular slide if any other thoughts come up. But if everyone's okay with it, I'll move on to the next section. Oops. Increases to fines for public property use. So under this category, we're only looking at increasing one fine at this time, and that's vehicles used for camping. Currently, the penalty for that is $200, and we're looking to increase that one up to $240. This particular one, this fines were issued in this category about 400 times in 2020, and we're already up to about 50 for 2021. So this is an area that we would like to get the word out that it does have some consequences that are worth considering prior to deciding where to camp in your vehicle. So increases to fines for continuing with the public property use, we have parked within 5 meters of a hydrant. There's an error on my slide here. Instead of public property use in the second section, this should say parking regulation. So parked within 5 meters of a hydrant, parked within 6 meters of a crosswalk, trailer or motorhome used for accommodation, parked in a loading zone, and parked in a fire zone. So again, these are very common issues that we deal with on a regular basis, and several of them have a safety aspect to them as well with the hydrants and the crosswalks. And again, so the current penalties are listed in red, and then the proposed new penalties are the next column to the right in the black. And so I'll give you another moment to have a look at those and let me know if there's any thoughts on them.
Chief Baker, I think, may I go? I think there's an error under the parked in fire zones because the current is 100 and the penalty is 100 and the new one is 200. Sorry, the early option is 200.
Must be a typo.
I think it's a typo there. I'd have to take a second and look to see what it actually says in the bylaw there, but
Would they have been switched? Penalty 200 and then the early 100?
That's what it should be.
Yeah, I believe that's what's correct there. I don't have the actual report open right in front of me here to just double check that and confirm, but
It would match with the park within 6 meters of a crosswalk.
it should match with the same one as parked within 6 meters. Yeah.
If I may, just have the bylaw, the amending bylaw open. It is increasing the fine to $200, increasing the fine to $200, a $240 late payment amount, and then there's no compliance agreement.
Thank you.
I have a question, Chief Baker. Just if I may, Mayor Law.
Yes, please go ahead. I can't see your hand, so please.
Yeah. Chief Baker, I was just curious on the trailer motor home used for accommodation. The fine amount, is that a daily fine amount? If the infraction was not concluded at that time, that would be a daily amount, I suspect. I just wanted some clarification.
Absolutely, it's daily, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just ask the rationale for the differences in early payment options, say between fire law and vehicle law, like with parking, say a penalty is 200 and early payments 100, but if you have a fire discretion, it's say after 11 p.m. it's 200, but the early payment's only 160. So why the discrepancy? What suddenly dictates, well, made you decide 100 in one case and 160 in another case?
Sorry, just to clarify, we're comparing between the fire zone and which one?
Well, I'm saying if you look at the fines in the burning bylaw,
yes,
or outdoor burning, and say you pick anyone, say that's got a fine of $200, and then you say you've got a early payment is 160. Yet if we go over to parking and you have a penalty of $200, the early payment's $100. So why is it an extra $60 if it's a burning offence as opposed to a parking offence? I just wondered why the reasoning is.
Yeah, well, we went mostly sort of in increases the way they are in consistency with other municipalities and that sort of thing. And then with the parking ones, we always have other options as well too. With, for instance, parking in a fire zone or in front of a hydrant or a crosswalk is potentially a towable offense as well too. So we have a few different options. So mostly it was just looking at what the percentage increase is already and then just bumping it up very slightly and keeping a similar percentage. So the parking ones were lower in general, and I still feel they could be increased even more, but trying to stay consistent with what other municipalities are doing as well too. Okay, so we will move on to the last one. So this one is a little bit different. For the sections referenced in the zoning bylaw, we're not looking to increase any of the fines. This is just a little bit of a housekeeping. So as I mentioned, in the last couple of years, the zoning bylaw has seen some updates. However, the bylaw 1107, which outlines all the fines, was not updated to match the sections of reference in the zoning bylaw. So again, in our left-hand column, we have the description of the contravention. And then if you look at the right-hand column, this is how the sections are currently listed in bylaw 1107. And the column immediately to the left is just the corrected sections listed there so that we can actually issue, if needed, any bylaw notices and provide the right sections for reference on those notices. So again, no changes to the fines in this category. It's just matching up the sections per one bylaw with another.
Councillor Steer, your mute is on.
Thank you, Councillor Law, or Mayor Law. Chief Baker, once again, those are daily fine amounts, I take it.
Yes, every fine that's listed through the bylaws is, each day is considered a separate offense. So anything that's ongoing more than one day, the potential is there to issue those fines every single day.
Thank you.
So if we move on to recommendations, staff is recommending that the District of Tofino Bylaw Notice and Dispute Amendment Bylaw number 1107.15 2021 be read a first, second, and third time.
Chief Baker, if you can, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Perfect.
There we go. If there's any questions or anything you would like me to go back to?
Councillor Chalmers and then Councillor Thick.
Oh, I was happy to make a motion, but if Councillor Thick has something to say, then I can wait.
Okay, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, I just wondered, Brent, why it seems by comparison, I think you might have answered this, but I'm sorry if I'm going backwards, but it seems that the fines for the STR violations are rather light. And did you explain why they haven't been increased? I just think, you know, in comparison to what people are charging now, and those, you know, we're having a lot of troubles with that, it seems. So I'm just wondering why there isn't a bigger penalty for those offenses.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to bylaw notices, which this is what we've just been talking about here, there's a maximum that's set out in the community charter that allows us to issue a notice up to $500. And so that's what the ones regarding the short-term rentals are. When we look at municipal ticket information, which is another form of ticket that we can issue, we could do an increased fine for those. For instance, we have ones that affect some of the short-term rentals might be uses contrary to zoning, and that could apply to vacation rental that's not zoned for that use. We issue the fine, and that could be $1,000 for that type of thing, and that's $1,000 per day. So there's two different types of fine systems that we can utilize. Bylaw notices have a maximum of $500, and any disputes get settled through an adjudication process. The municipal ticket information, they have higher fine amounts, but disputes get settled through the court system. And so it's a little bit different there.
And just curious, what sort of compliance have you had in payment? What sort of percentage of the fines that you've issued have actually been paid? Is there any way of getting some even just rough estimates?
Yeah, absolutely. We tend to average between 45 and 50% capture rate on fines, which is fairly average throughout the province. So we're looking at ways to try and increase that, but that seems to be pretty consistent across the province. Just to add on to that, that's capture rate up front when we look at, so just of the fines that were issued for 2020, we fall right into that ballpark. Ones that are not paid at that time do go to collections, and then they may trickle in afterwards. But when I'm looking at that percentage, I'm usually dealing with what it is within that year. So it's really hard to calculate the stuff that trickles in from collections that could be a year or two down the road and associate it with a specific time frame to give us a good statistic.
Yeah, and lastly, with the, on the side where you talk about car camping and I think trailer, there was two different words used. One was camping and one was accommodation. And I know in some parts in the US, they actually use the word overnight sleeping. But I just wonder, is there any chance we could run into problems with those, with using two different words? Because people say, well, I'm not really camping, I'm just sleeping in my car. So how do you capture overnight sleeping if that's the problem?
Yeah.
And what we do about those two different words in, I think, almost the same, it means the same thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to just look and see exactly what the wording was. I believe we have vehicle used for accommodation, and the other one is trailer or motorhome used for accommodation. Really what it comes down to, we have only been to adjudication once over a vehicle used for camping or accommodation dispute. And that came down to, did the individual have items in there to support sleeping in a vehicle? The one instance that went to dispute was somebody that decided not to drive home after having a couple of drinks, spent the night in their car, received a ticket, and an adjudicator said there was no intent to camp in the vehicle. This is very different from somebody that is fully set up with curtains and cooking equipment and sleeping bags and all those sorts of things. And they made that a very clear distinction. Anything that supports an overnight stay was considered accommodation or camping. But if you're just happen to be there, for that type of a reason, like I said, we've only ever had, in my 5 years now, there's only been one dispute for vehicle use accommodation that has actually gone as far as adjudication, and that was the decision process there.
So what I hear you saying is,
okay, I just want to make, sorry, I'm going to jump in here just to make sure that we're discussing the fines and fees. I'm not sure if we're discussing language about the bylaws itself, but I just want to make that clear, just to pump in there. If you can go ahead, Councillor Thick, I just want to.
I was just wondering because, yeah, I just was curious because I saw the two words on the same page that alluded to the same thing, and I just wondered, are they interchangeable, or are we going to get, into trouble with just those two different words for the same thing? It's a small point.
Councillor McMaster, you had your hand up there.
Just going back to my first comment, I think for the sake of uniformity and consistency, it would be a lot easier if we just said, this is a fine. If you pay early, you get a certain discount, which seems like 25% generally. And if you pay late, you're going to pay 50% extra, instead of this dial a number of, in one case, you pay early, it's $160, and in another case, you pay early, it's $100. I mean, to me, a $200 fine, doesn't matter what you do, it's still $200. What does the rest of the council think about that?
All right, go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
I think it's fine as is. I think who's it making it easier for when they get a fine? They'll see what their options are. I think the staff's put a lot of work into the report and done their research, and I think we're getting a bit into semantics personally. So I'd be happy to make the motion.
I'll just answer that before you make a motion. Make it a lot easier writing the report, because you wouldn't have to list all those penalties. You could just say 25% if you pay early and 50% if you pay late. And you've just cut out a page of all your tables for future.
Yeah, I just have one comment that I understood that the fines also relate to enforcement, and I know that enforcing fires on the beach and fire infractions it takes a lot more time than parking. So that was what I had assumed was those differences, giving, paying more for a early payment if the actual enforcement takes more effort.
We're talking about fines and not the procedure.
No, the fines, that's what I mean, the fines. Yeah. But
the format that I presented the information in today is consistent with how that particular bylaw 1107 has been set up since the beginning. So without me changing every fine listed in the Schedule A, sticking with the same format for consistencies, felt important to me to make sure that that was simple and consistent throughout that. Definitely understand that things can be open to interpretation, and yeah.
I was just trying to make things simpler for you.
I appreciate that.
I'll support this, but I will say, yeah, if we're having increased bylaw enforcement and we're increasing fines, and I know fines, I fully support fines are a deterrent, but I hope we're going to see some fines issued to pay for this bylaw enforcement increase in costs. I'll leave it at that.
Hey, Councillor Chalmers, please go ahead and make that motion.
I will move that the District of Tofino Bylaw Notice and Dispute Amendment Bylaw number 1107.15.2021 be read a first, second, and third time.
You have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Anderson, any further comments, questions? All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Thank you, Chief Baker, and thank you, Council, for all your comments. 8.5, Committee of the Whole. We have a motion to receive the minutes.
I'll move receipt of minutes of Committee of the Whole, March 15th, 2021.
Second that.
Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Or sorry, any comments, questions? All in favor? Motion's carried. None opposed. Motion's carried. Now we have
there's a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Councillor Chalmers.
I'll move the provision of 385 or 391 Main Street as a location for the Tofino branch of the Vancouver Island Regional Library be confirmed, and that the construction of a library be supported with modifications to meet district development permit requirements and to address Tofino's population, catchment, and climate.
Seconder. Councillor Thick. And any comments, questions? All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. 9.1 bylaws, District of Tofino Delegation of a Council Authority Amendment Bylaw number 1237-03.
I'll move this one, that the District of Tofino Delegation and Council Authority Amendment Bylaw number 1237.03, 2021 be adopted.
Seconder, Councillor McMaster. Any comments, questions? All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. 9.2, District of Tofino MTI and Bylaw Notice Amendment Bylaw number 1107.14. We have somebody move the recommendation.
I'll move that the District of Tofino MTI and Bylaw Notice Amendment Bylaw number 1107.14, 2021 be adopted.
Second.
Councillor Anderson, any comments, questions? All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. 9.3, District of Tofino Building Bylaw Amendment, Step Code 2, Bylaw number 1256.02. Recommendation, Councillor Anderson.
I'll move that there's District of Tofino Building Bylaw Amendment, Step Code number 2, Bylaw number 1256.02, 2021 be adopted.
Second, Councillor Chalmers. Any questions, comments? All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. We have business initiated by council members. We have committee and external appointment verbal reports from council members. Do we have any? No. Okay. Unfinished business. No unfinished business. And do we have, Elise, do we have anybody signed up for questions?
Through the mayor, we do not have anybody signed up for the question period.
Great. So from the chair, we're going to go into closed session. So I move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91AC and 92B of the community charter to discuss matters related to personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an office, employee, or agent, employee relations, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and the provincial government, or between the provincial government and a third party. Somebody second. Councillor McMaster. Any comments, questions? All in favor? None opposed. Motion's
Can I
carried.
request a 2-minute recess, please?
Perfect. Let's do a 2-minute recess.